Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of TL Blue, your fortnightly cybersecurity-based news podcast. My name is Richard Granger, and today I'm joined by Caleb Boyd. How you going, Caleb?
Yeah, good. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. It's only February, but it already feels like we're 6 months into the year. Everything's keeping us busy.
Definitely.
Yeah, and today we've got a lot to talk about, haven't we? We had a bit of a skip on the last fortnight, just due to some work that we needed to get through. But now we're back, and we've got some good stories, haven't we?
We sure do. Yeah, the year started off quiet, and then it went all very crazy very quickly. We're discussing quite a lot today. So the government has introduced new sanctions. So where did they come from? And what will that lead to? And especially, will that law enforcement success that we saw last year continue into 2025? So we'll discuss that and our predictions. OneDrive has introduced a new feature called offline mode, and it has some pretty concerning, depending on how you view it, features that are as part of that introduction. We've also got an insight into a Ransomware-as-a-Service and how their business model works as a, threat group. We'll also talk about how the Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, maybe their government checks for employees weren't so efficient, and what our thoughts are around that. We'll also look into fake captchas and what they can lead to in terms of ransomwares and different investigations. And of course, we'll finish off with the vulnerability of the fortnight, which is SimpleHelp, which we know all too well, unfortunately.
All right, well, kicking off then, the further sanctions in response to Medibank. Why don't you give us an overview of that?
Yeah, so sanctions are quite a big thing, and they've shown a lot of success in Australia, particularly, as well as across the world, around ransomware payments, as well as the success of these groups. On the 22nd of January, so ACSC released a publication and it detailed bulletproof hosting providers. And I've never heard that term before, but it turns out we actually know these bulletproof hosting providers very, very well. Didn't know what they were referred to. So a bulletproof hosting provider is perhaps a infrastructure provider that provides servers or cloud infrastructure to criminals, and they're not very responsive to takedown requests, either that through law enforcement or ourselves in incident response matters. And I'm sure, Rich, you could probably talk to this in ransomware engagements. Our success rate with takedowns is very hit and miss.
It is. It definitely depends on the provider. And I guess for context for listeners as well is once we sort of identify, particularly during ransomware engagements, where data has left the client's environment and been transferred to a server in control of the threat actor, we want to do whatever we can to limit the spread of that data further from there. So as part of that, it's often providing information, often through legal teams that are involved in the response, to try and get the server hoster, the hosting provider, to bring down that server that's holding that information and try and prevent the further publication, which often happens with ransomware groups on their leak sites. But yes, it's very much sometimes it's fruitful and sometimes it's not situation.
I think potentially even the country where these infrastructure is hosted or the business is run from is a very big player in that happening.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It's quite interesting how these providers are actually advertising themselves as bulletproof from, law enforcement agencies, and saying, we won't respond to takedown requests, host with us. It's very interesting, that whole model. And it's proven evidence in the Medibank attack, and that's where we're going into the sanctions discussion. So there was a hosting provider which is called Z Servers, I believe it is, and they were a Russian bulletproof hosting provider, and they facilitated the hosting and then subsequent data publication of the Medibank private data breach. So clearly cyber criminals are using these infrastructures. And I guess pivoting from I just want to touch on also business email compromises and the success that we've had with takedowns in business email compromises. Where we are issuing takedown requests in business email compromises is where fraudulent domains are registered to facilitate payment redirection fraud. And it makes it really hard to actually have a successful takedown because these takedown requests are asking for malicious content that is publicly accessible. But when a threat actor is using these domains to do private email communications to intercept funds, where's the evidence of malicious infrastructure that's on public accessible? So
it's not exactly. Yeah.
You could have a legitimate service provider saying, hey, we can't really take this down. We don't really have enough evidence. Takedown requests are a whole big problem in themselves.
Yeah, it's definitely it's difficult. And we do sometimes get the question from the clients, like, you know, after something's been listed on a leak site from a ransomware group, it's like, can't you just delete it? It's like, I wish we could. Unfortunately, it's not that simple.
Definitely. Yeah, and even the times that we have had success with takedown requests, they have backups through actors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have in a few instances. And
yeah. I mean, we've seen it, you know, from some of our activity where we know that the data is still there despite them saying that it's been deleted, and obviously more publicly as well through the takedown of Lockbit last year, where, you know, law enforcement were able to reveal and show, hey, there's still this data that they said that they deleted from victims who paid. They've still got copies of it.
So going back to the sanctions, so the Australian government, as well as a number of different government agencies, introduced sanctions across 5 individuals. And these 5 individuals weren't, whilst they were tied to the Medibank breach, they simply provided this bulletproof hosting provider. And all of these employees, as well as the owner of the servers, has now got sanctions against them, and that should hopefully prevent this type of activity happening a little bit further. And whole government's preach is, you know, the claim of bulletproof has clearly not lasted very long because we have been able to take them down, and that's what they claim in, which is fantastic. And it does leave the question of, well, they've shown so much success, and now we're in 2025, and they've shown even more success. So we can start to predict what might happen, and will ransomware continue to reign in 2025?
Yeah.
So in terms of ransomware and our outlook for 2025, ransomware, the volume of ransomware payments had decreased 35 year over year, which is absolutely fantastic. So there's a number of different organizations that have published their predictions, notably Coveware, and then also Chain Analysis on their predictions for the year ahead. When we go into the graphs of these articles that they produce, it's actually really interesting in terms of the statistics. So you can see Coveware in particular is seeing a really big decrease in the percentage of payment rates. So they've seen those payment rates, like the amount of victims that are paying, is going down, but they've seen an increase in the average payment size. So that means the threat actors are probably aware of this happening, and they're asking for more.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a correlation between the sort of decrease in payments being made versus, and like, I guess, organizations having better backups and response at being able to very quickly recover from incidents like ransomware. I think a lot of the time, and we've talked about this many times, it's sort of a lot of the time paying the ransom generally comes down to, can you recover your systems or not? And in situations where you don't have backups, that's probably a situation where an organization may consider paying the ransom to be able to decrypt their systems and continue to operate their business.
Definitely. Having backups is one thing, and I guess we go into incidents sometimes and an organization believes their backups are intact and they will have a place to recover, but those backups are encrypted. So really important also making sure those backups are in a secure location that a threat actor can't access.
Yeah,
really, really critical. And like you say, those are the organizations that recover quickly. They don't even have to negotiate with the threat actor, and they will have a smooth investigation. Obviously, a very unfortunate circumstance, though. Moving into the next article that we've got, OneDrive. So we all use OneDrive, probably. Microsoft's ecosystem is absolutely ginormous. OneDrive we use usually in the cloud and will sync locally to our own devices. But Microsoft has introduced a productivity focused feature, which is called offline mode. Offline mode will obviously store all your files locally, and it will allow you to search them without an internet connection. Sounds pretty convincing and a good idea, but when you search for your documents in the cloud, you can search for keywords and it will bring up different pictures, PDF documents, and that's facilitated through OCR, which effectively will extract text from images, PDF documents, you name it. That now is getting stored on the local device. So where you might take a photo of your driver's license number is now stored on your local computer in plain text. Obviously, not great practice to install those pictures on your computer in the first place, but it does raise concern, I guess, or does it not raise concern with that data being on the actual device itself?
Yeah, I was sort of looking through this before when you linked it, and I think the implications of having that information, so it's storing it in a database, an unencrypted database on the local machine, which is obviously a bit of a risk because that can be exfiltrated, it can be viewed, and potentially hold very sensitive information. So I'm wondering if potentially, how we've got info stealers and other tools like that are already looking for sensitive repositories of information like Google Chrome databases that store usernames and passwords, things like that. Maybe these tools will expand to focus on this information to be able to rip out, unencrypted plain text information that could be very sensitive.
Definitely. And I think it's probably a red teamer's dream in some senses. Imagine if you could search the database for the word password or driver's license.
Yeah.
You got a really good finding to present at the end of the day. You're sitting back laughing.
Yeah.
But I guess, I don't know, it would be good to see some further research. And I guess there is a little bit of speculation, this is on the machine. Someone would have to log in to be able to access this. But then that does beg the question of, well, we need a defensive depth approach. And whilst the threat actor might be able to log in, what other controls? And maybe we should implement some further controls around this database.
Yeah. It's just sort of given me, I'm recalling recall now. I think,
yes.
Brad and I discussed this several months ago. I think it's on a similar vein, isn't it? Where it's, sensitive information being stored unencrypted. And I mean, Microsoft has sort of, mentioned that, security is first in their products as well. So be interested to see sort of how this plays out, whether things will be revisited by Microsoft, sort of based on some of the commentary from security professionals. It's always a balance, isn't it? Trying to weigh up security and also usability, because I do sort of see the value in something like this. If you're on a plane and you're working and you don't have internet and you're trying to look for something on your OneDrive, I can see the use cases, but perhaps we can have usability like this, but also increase the security of it as well.
It's that never-ending scale between productivity and security. I think productivity definitely is the preference across a lot of people, unfortunately.
Yeah.
This is something that actually the SOC and also ourselves have seen quite recently, and it's showing quite a concerning uptick, is fake captchas. I think I'm probably not alone in saying captchas are very annoying. And I think in the last few years, I feel like I'm answering, is this a bus, multiple times throughout my day, and it can get quite repetitive. So, well, threat actors have noticed that trend and they caught onto it, and they said, well, people obviously have this resistance to I guess, captchas. So they've introduced these fake web pages where you click the Captcha button, and where you'd usually be presented with a bus or, I believe, a road cone or something of that nature, you are asked to press Windows R, and that will open up a execution dialog where you can paste your code and press enter. Pretty, I guess, like for someone that's not technical, you're probably wondering what's actually happening there. Well, that is executing code, which is usually encoded, and that's leading to things like stealers or bootloader, or effectively a threat actor accessing that device from that point thereon.
Yeah, it's definitely seemed to have had a bit of an uptick over the past few weeks. Like when I know we, as you mentioned, the SOC had an incident involving this, and we worked on that with them as well. And that was using Mint Loader, I think it was, for the malware variant. And it seems that this technique has been around for quite some time. But yeah, we're sort of just seeing a resurgence in it, I suppose. And yeah, it's pretty clever when you think about it. A lot of the time, users are, captchas. That's not malicious. That's just annoying. And okay, well, I'll do what it says. I don't know any better. I don't know what the bring up Windows R does, and this command doesn't look bad, so I'll run it, and I can do what I need to do. So it does seem to be pretty effective. At least from the incidents that we've seen as well.
Definitely. And they've got a foothold then right there in the environment. I saw actually, like, there's been a lot of talk around this fake Captcha business because it's shown a lot of success. And I guess it's pretty concerning where someone might put an ad on Google, or they might hijack a website. But I saw mention of it being used in a phishing email. So they send across the phishing email and says, hey, please can you click on this link to activate your password, or, the usual phishing email business. And then it redirects you to the page where it has a Captcha and goes to the log, etc. So that could be the age-old BC leading to ransomware in some cases.
Yeah. I think for organizations to defend against this, I think probably user awareness training is probably a big one, to sort of let users know that this is not a normal Captcha. Go back to being frustrated by clicking on all the buses and then finding more buses hidden behind those Captchas. But I think as well, endpoint detection and response is key here to see what's going on hosts, on user workstations, and being able to having someone actually monitoring that. I think within a couple of minutes of the incident the SOC dealt with recently involving this, they isolated that machine, they contacted the client, and they'd started the investigation to prevent anything further malicious from happening. So it's a couple of strategies organizations can use to try and combat this.
For sure. I also saw mention of, like, just like you pointed out, a normal user won't know what the WinR dialogue is. No one should be running it. So make a detection and go, when that runs on a admin or accountant machine, quickly look into that. We talk about ransomware as a service and ransomware as a whole quite largely. And we talk about these threat groups, and we'll talk about Lockbit, Lynx, Ransom Hub. So there's lots of different threat groups out there. But at the core of what they're doing is that effectively they're running a business. It's a criminal business, but it's a business model. So we've seen a number of different posts out in the internet around how these business models go, and it's known as ransomware as a service. And effectively, it's a model where an affiliate or someone will go to Ransom Hub in this case, and they'll say, hey, we want to buy your services, and the services will be a ransomware binary where they can encrypt the environment, as well as the facilities to post their leak site. So Group IB, which is really good at their threat intelligence especially, they posted around the Lynx threat group. And they've actually been able to give a really good understanding of what goes on in the background of a threat group. So they've shown the panels where an affiliate can post on the league site, as well as where they can download some of the tooling, etc. So really interesting how that does work from, I guess, a business model, even though it is a criminal business model.
Yeah, I sort of looking through the their blog, Group IB's blog article, and sort of detailing some of the stuff, and I noted that there's some of the key features and capabilities is you got the options there for call center harassment, or often known triple extortion, where victim organizations will receive phone calls from people purporting to be from the ransomware group, putting additional pressure on them to pay the ransom. And I think we've definitely seen an uptick in that activity, I'd say probably over the last few months, haven't we?
Definitely, for sure. I think we all refer to him as Andrew, and that's widely known.
Yeah.
For a couple $100, it's believed that you can pay this Andrew individual and he will contact the organization. So yeah, definitely an interesting conversation to have when an organization is compromised. You have to inform them, hey, you probably need to tell your staff to expect phone calls now. Something that we weren't saying a couple of years ago. Yeah,
that's right. And now we pretty much say it for every client working on the ransomware. Sort of when we get involved and engaged early on, is like just so you're aware, we've seen this happening, and sometimes we can provide a bit more granularity around the expectation depending on the group and our previous experience. But we sort of do let them know it's like, hey, your directors, staff, you're going to get calls from someone, and they're going to be talking to you about the attack and just putting extra pressure on you as well. So it's just something you need to be prepared for.
Within the same month, something even greater was released, and that's Black Basta's chat logs. So these are internal logs between the cyber criminals where they're discussing, how do you do this? How do you get access into that environment? We've compromised this organization. So all of their internal communications were posted by an individual. Now, for one, it's really interesting to read the way that they're communicating with each other, but it also goes further, and it's got a lot of value for us as defenders, because there's a number of different security researchers out there that have built out dashboards, etc., and we can collect indicators of compromise, understand their techniques, and I guess the real call out from a number of different people across the industry is that these threat groups are aware of our techniques just as much as we are aware of their techniques. Yeah. They are aware of the defenses, and they're working around those defenses.
It's a cat and mouse, game, isn't it? I did see on, I think it was LinkedIn yesterday or the day before, that someone has ingested all of this information into an LLM. So you can sort of go in and ask, ChatGPT. It's like, all right, well, tell me about this and tell me about that, which I haven't had to play with yet. I'm keen to do that, because I think this is going to be a very interesting data set, probably, on par with the Conti leaks we had a couple of years ago as well, about sort of showing the inner workings of these kinds of groups.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing to see how they do operate. And it goes back to, the previous article where we're talking about it's a business model. They trying to make money, and they trying to get ahead of us. We trying to catch up. And when things like these leaks are released, it gives us a little bit of a time where we can go, okay, we should probably learn and try and increase our defenses. So yeah, saw that same guy's LMM model. It is absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, definitely recommend checking it out.
Yeah.
Musk has obviously stirred up quite a bit in the US around how his Department of Government Efficiency is working. Well, we won't be talking too much about is it a good idea? Is it not a good idea? The ways that he's been doing it, but particularly there's been call outs of a 19-year-old within his Department of Government Efficiency that had previous ties to cyber criminals. Now, from our perspective, obviously, as organizations, we need to be really aware of this. We are employing people. We need to make sure that those people are who they say they are, as well as making sure that they can actually do the job that they've come in to do.
Yeah, it's very interesting in this case in particular as well. So like, I'll sort of tell a bit of a story about how we were involved in an investigation with a school, and there was a student that was I'd say that they were not adhering to the acceptable use policy of the school, and they were very interested in breaking out of the confines of what they were supposed to be able to do and do things that they weren't supposed to be able to do. And I think the principal at that school's like, you should hire them for give them a job. I'm like, it's probably not a bad idea. Like they've obviously got that mindset where they would be very good at offensive security, probably other parts of different roles in security as well. So I think that is probably not uncommon for a lot of people to try and bypass school restrictions and things like that. And I think that could show that they're very good at a particular skill set, which would set them up for success in security. And would I hold that against them if they had a job interview and they're like, yeah, I got in trouble at school for hacking into things I shouldn't have? Probably not. Someone that's been convicted of like pretty severe cyber crimes, I'm not sure if I would be as willing to bring them into the role, particularly when we're talking about government agencies and things like that here as well. It's a bit of a different story.
Yeah, for sure. You have that, I guess, that threshold where you go, can we turn them into white hat hacker in this case or not? And I think the US has really done a great job. I think there's a number of programs where they focus on like identifying these younger audiences that are interested in hacking and showing them, well, you can actually use these skills for really good, and you can protect our critical infrastructure, our banks, you name it. So there's definitely good out of that. And I guess we all probably, being in IT, showed a little bit of interest at a young age in cybersecurity.
Yeah. Because from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of a fact that they didn't necessarily know about his past when they gave him the role, rather than, all right, we know you've done this, and maybe they've made a decision to say, all right, well, we'll leave that in the past, and obviously you're a very skilled individual and good at what you do, and we want to take you on that path of good and protect organizations rather than attack them. But I think the fact that they potentially didn't know, that's kind of a bit of a gap, in my opinion, when we're talking about hiring people into particularly secretive and sensitive organizations.
It is hard for organizations, especially with employing people in cybersecurity, because I guess some of these individuals might not have a criminal record. They maybe haven't passed that threshold where they've committed a crime. And where do you how do you find that out, and how do you make sure that you're hiring a person that's probably not going to be too much of a risk for your organization? It's going to increase your business and improve it at the end of the day.
Yeah, all good points. I don't know. I don't think we can solve this, Caleb.
The vulnerability of the fortnight. So SimpleHelp, we know SimpleHelp very, very well. We probably know it from a different perspective to most organizations. We know SimpleHelp from threat actors introducing SimpleHelp into environments. We talk quite often around a remote management and monitoring solution. So the common ones are TeamViewer, AnyDesk, Screen Connect. They probably used by your IT admins in your environment. Well, SimpleHelp is an alternative to those. And threat actors like to use SimpleHelp and deploy it in their environment because that's what they're familiar with. In this case, we're talking about the vulnerability for SimpleHelp. We're talking about a vulnerable component which allows a unauthenticated remote attacker to download files. And where this gets pretty concerning is it allows an attacker to retrieve the server's configuration file, exposing the technician's account information as well as their password hashes.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad one. I think this one it's probably flown sort of under the radar a bit, because I don't think SimpleHelp, like when people think of RMM and remote access tools and things like that, SimpleHelp probably not front of mind. You're thinking about the big ones like Ninja and TeamViewer and things like that, but SimpleHelp is it is used by organizations for RMM purposes. Obviously, as you mentioned, Caleb, we're very familiar from it from a response perspective, but we do occasionally see organizations are using it. And yeah, it's a particularly impactful vulnerability with the being able to sort of traverse paths and steal information. We did do some testing around this as well, and we're able to sort of validate the vulnerability and look a little bit further into the impact that could have in terms of the information that's stored in the configuration files, including sort of the hashed user passwords and things like that. And I think we're probably going to be looking to do a bit of a white paper on that at some point. So we'll make sure to let all our listeners know once that's up. But yeah, it's pretty bad in a nutshell. So I think if you are using SimpleHelp to facilitate RMM within your environment or your customers' environments, they've got articles on their website sort of discuss the vulnerabilities and the fixes for them, which do include sort of updating the versioning of the software so that it's no longer vulnerable as well.
We started off quite quiet in the year, but now I guess as DFIR, we are absolutely crazy busy. We have a lot going on as well as in the SOC. And I guess it's just some call outs that we've got noted down: passwords, and I guess the complexity of those passwords. In terms of the way that we've seen threat actors enter environments, it is passwords, weak passwords, making sure that those passwords are rotated, and especially service account passwords. Really important. Just wanted to call that one out as well. Another thing that we wanted to call out is also monitoring and incident response plans. We had a case where the SOC picked up an alert, and a couple hours later that was contained by the client. What we typically see, this was a compromise where it was a business email compromise. If that had gone undetected, it can usually result in a threat actor being in an environment for, say, upwards of 30 days. They can look around their email account, and that can lead to a lot of devastation, particularly around your privacy obligations. So yet again, passwords and incident response plans and monitoring.
Yeah, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head. We say this, we talk about these all the time, but just echoing what you said, Caleb, it's like it is a lot of the time, it comes down to weak passwords. Even, the SimpleHelp stuff we were just talking about, and the hashed user passwords that are available in the config files. If you have weak passwords, those hashes become very easy to crack, and threat actors to be able to use those passwords to do malicious activity. And I think, again, as well, calling out the service accounts you mentioned as well. We see a lot of organizations have very weak passwords internally. So not just, accounts that are being used to access systems remotely, like the VPN accounts and, Citrix accounts and things like that, but the privileged internal accounts, whether it's a service account, domain admin account, we see these being accessed by threat actors all the time, which is very, very impactful. So for context, when a threat actor gets into someone's network, they might start off as a low privilege account, and they're doing everything they possibly can to get domain admin and escalate their privileges, because that's what's going to allow them to go and access pretty much every server in the environment. They're going to be able to extract things like the NTTS.dit. They're going to be able to modify group policy. They're going to be able to do whatever they want to be able to achieve their objectives. So just making sure that all these accounts have very strong passwords is definitely our recommendation.
For sure.
Excellent. Well, I think we've got through all those topics in almost record timing. Any other final words, Caleb?
No, I think that's been awesome. Covered a lot.
Excellent. All right. Well, just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in, and we will catch you in a fortnight with the next episode. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.